My name is Mukund Rao. I'm a geologist by profession. I did my bachelor's and master's in geology in 1980, and later on I did my PhD in remote sensing and GIS. My professional journey started with space activities. In 1981, I joined ISRO, or the Space Application Center in Ahmedabad. Over the last 40 and odd years, 41 years to be precise, I've gathered many milestones and many experiences which I want to just share and bring about my own learning that I have done and try to give a roadmap of what way the things have developed in specific areas of space where I have worked, and also remember some of the wonderful people with whom I worked along this journey. So I think my earliest memory of anything related to space when I joined ISRO is Professor Dhawan. I joined SAC ISRO in 1981, and in 1983, the first NNRMS seminar, the National Natural Resources Management System seminar, was held in Hyderabad. And that was the first time, I think, where the idea of a national system for using remote sensing and creating a management system to help governance in the country was sort of visualized and outlined by Professor Dhawan. I was a rookie at the time, just out of university, and with wide eyes, I still recall watching Professor Dhawan on the stage in the conference, in the inaugural, a very dapper person, very smart looking, with his high pants, with a nice belt around it, and he gave an outline of NNRMS. Even today, it is relevant, and sometimes I make my own assessment of how much of that vision have we really achieved. The fundamental point of the vision that he outlined was that if remote sensing has to be really meaningful, it has to be a part of the management system at the national level. And he outlined a vision saying that to work on this national system of management support that remote sensing can provide, it is the user agencies that have to drive it. While the technologists from ISRO can provide the technology support, he outlined in 1983 a user-oriented concept where users use remote sensing and get the benefit and help governance in the country. I still recall him in his 30-minute speech that he gave on that day. He had a very typical style of pumping the ground when he spoke with passion and sometimes throwing his arms, and that is etched in my memory. And today also I believe that if remote sensing has to be meaningful, it has to be by the user agencies, except that the user agencies today are much different than what the user agencies were outlined in 1983. So to me, that was the mantra, a user-oriented remote sensing application support program which helps the nation, which helps the country or in the governance and in the management. So this is one of the earliest sort of etched memory in my mind, and that's how I then started my space activities of following the seminar or during that time. Very soon, I was exposed to one of the best computers that ISRO had brought, the VAX 11780 at the time in Space Application Center, with image analysis system, which if you look at it today, it looks very rudimentary, but I can tell you I was damn thrilled to work on those systems at that time. Being a geologist, never having worked on a computer, this was something like a techno exposure to me, thrown into the techno world of VAX 11780, tapes, discs, and so on. I and my colleague, one Mr. P.S. Thakkar and Mr. A.R. Dasgupta, who was my boss at that time and a mentor who I really value even today, we quickly took up a study to study the city of Ahmedabad using Landsat images and digital image processing to find out what has been the growth over time and what are the changes. I think this was the first of the digital image analysis for work for an urban area in 1982, which showed the change from 1975 Ahmedabad to 1982 Ahmedabad. So we published a paper And that really opened up a lot of ideation about digital analysis, supervised classification, its accuracy, its inaccuracies, the spectral signature analysis, how change detection can be done. So we collected all those experiences and we wrote a beautiful paper which we presented in the ISPRS conference that was held in Delhi. And that was one of the earliest digital exposure that I got to doing digital analysis and digital applications. Very soon, Mr. Dasgupta introduced us to the concept of GIS. It was in 1981, I think, where NCST, the National Center for Software Technology in Mumbai, got the first conference on GIS by getting one lady professor, Duane Marble from Ohio State University. And we had the exposure to that first GIS workshop. And then we understood this GIS, saying that, okay, now you have images which are digital, you can also make maps which are digital. Till the time, maps were never seen in a digital format at all. So we started looking at information systems of combining remote sensing and maps. And we did the first experiment called a mineral exploration information system using satellite images and maps by digitizing them manually involving the government of Gujarat. And this was a very small experiment, very manually done by gridding, grid-based GIS at the time. And we did an analysis to identify how minerals can be characterized by merging different types of information. Very simple study, but gave a thrill to us, saying that now we can combine maps, images, and do some integrated analysis, factorial analysis. We did some principal component analysis on the various data sets and so on. So very soon we realized that the power of information system is what is going to be the future. And this was way back in 82, 83 time frame. And then Mr. Dasgupta took up these ideas with the chairman, Professor Dhawan, and Y.S. Rajan, who was the scientific secretary at the time. And we established a special task force for a natural resources information system. And I was a member of the task force and a key contributor to defining that vision of a national natural resources information system which will support the NNRMS. So the management system must have an information system backing it. So that was how it was visualized at the time. So this brought us to a concept saying that, okay, if this is the thing, where are some case studies to do these applications? Very soon we got a commercial software from outside about GIS and image processing. And we did some very classic studies for various districts in India. I still recall one of the district we did was in Bharatpur. We did a district plan. Actually, at the time, the district planning in 1985 was becoming very popular with the Panchayati Raj amendments that Rajiv Gandhi's regime was bringing about. So we did a district plan at that time and a very comprehensive GIS study. Even today, the reports are available and it was very systematically done and very comprehensive. And the district collector of Bharatpur was very taken in, and he said that he would like to sort of utilize this for his governance activities. And we were very happy to have Professor U.R. Rao, who was the chairman at the time, come down to Bharatpur. In a conference in Bharatpur district, he personally handed over the whole system of Bharatpur database and the computers and everything to the district collector. So that's how we started this concept of doing GIS applications. We then followed it up for Bombay Metropolitan Region, Dungarpur, we did for wasteland development planning, and a variety of GIS applications. By the time it was 7 to 8 years into my profession, and we had a team of people, and I think we got all the exposure that was required and the motivation to take up many of these activities. One of the things we learned at the time was that unless we standardize the data, the GIS applications are really not going to grow. You can't have unformatted, unstandard, non-matching data sets. So we brought out the first GIS standard in 1987, 88 timeframe. It's still available, and I think that formed the bedrock of most of our knowledge that we got about GIS applications, remote sensing applications, how to standardize them, and how to create large databases which can help in applications in the whole thing. So even while these applications were being done and many districts were taken up within ISRO and outside of ISRO by late 80s, the concept came up as to where is the GIS software available? If you have to do this in the whole country, does India have a GIS software? Again, Mr. A.R. Dasgupta and K.L. Majumdar, who was with him at the time, and I was associated in a very key manner, we took up the design and development of ISRO GIS software. Very early times, I must tell you that we didn't have operating systems at the time. DOS had just come in. Then Xenix was there. There was no graphical user interface. X Windows, which was the earliest of the Windows, had just come in. But then, under a technology transfer regime, we contracted two parties to develop this software. And those two parties were wonderful software companies, and one in Bangalore, one in Hyderabad. I still remember those two gentlemen, one K.T. Sridhar and K. Shankar. They're still very active in the software field, brilliant minds. And they came out with such algorithms and such unique solutions to solve the problem that we developed the ISRO GIS software by 89-90, and it was available. It still had a lot of journey to make before it became operational and product oriented and so on. But in those times when the world had just started GIS software in one or two places in United States, in ESRI, in Canada, India also brought up its ISRO GIS software. Of course, within ISRO, there were many ventures of GIS software development. There was one by RRSSE, there was one what we did, and there were some other trials and so on. But then these all allowed ideas to fructify and come up into different formats and the whole thing. And then the two industries, Pegasus software under Sridhar and ERA software under Shankar, they took on this technology and then they marketed the product in the whole thing. But I think somewhere down the line, the support that is required from the Indian market and Indian users was not forthcoming. The Aura foreign software, COT software was very easy to dampen the spirit of these two industries to take up the marketing part of it, and then over time I think it subsumed into the larger framework of commercially available software solutions. But the learning of algorithms and the solutions and the graphical user interface for the first time in the 80s in the ISRO GIS was fantastic. So to me also it was great to do the design and development part of it and do the testing and learn many of these things, which as once again I said, for a geologist it was something like a totally new experience to look at this point of time. So I think these all allowed us to learn something about GIS very deep. The knowledge base we created was very, very deep. We had a team of about 20-25 people who were excellent in doing many of these activities. And I think that was the biggest outcome of all the GIS activities that were taken up. Very soon, I think I moved to headquarters, the ISRO headquarters from Ahmedabad sometime in 1994. And one activity I very clearly remember, which I took up at that time, amongst many others, is the establishment of the UN Center for Space Technology and in the Asia Pacific region. It was a competitive award. China was there, Indonesia, Malaysia, India were there, and we had to really struggle to make all the proposals and get the center to India. And it was a great experience, of course, under the leadership of Dr. Kasturirangan at the time. M.G. Chandrasekhar was there, who was spearheading many of these activities, and K.R. Sridhar Murthy, with whom I have a very long association that we worked on this. On the United Nations side, we worked very closely with Nandi Jacintuliana, who was the director of UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, Adagun Abhyudan, who was also in the office, and ultimately we established the center in India. We established all the structures and the organizational frame that is required and the operational education programs for that particular activity, and I was one of the key persons associated. So suddenly I moved away from many of the information system activities to organizational structuring, policy making and other things when I came into headquarters in that sense. And soon another activity which I very vividly recall in the mid-90s to 2000 time frame was with the launch of IRS satellites, and specifically IRS-1C in 1995. I think India's presence in the international regime had to be increased, and we were not very active in the international regime of CIOS, IAF, ISPRS, and many other fora. So India bid for hosting the CIOS plenary, and we got the CIOS plenary in India in 1998. And under the leadership of Dr. Kasturirangan, I was given the secretarial charge to take up the establishment of the CIOS Secretariat here and organize the plenary. That was another exposure that I got, that for the first time, apart from doing information systems and understanding the Indian ethos of different cultures, I was exposed to the international regime. Working with 48 space agencies, specifically with the NASA, ESA, JAXA, team and moving around in international circles to do various types of CIOS activities, we founded the first principles of an international global observation strategy, IGOS, which is the precursor to the GEO, which is now prevalent in the country today. So the concept of IGOS and the concept of a global observing strategy where space agencies come together and collaborate to develop a global strategy was founded when India was the leader of CIOS under Dr. Kasurangan. We established the multilateral instruments that are required and the agreements required for that. And that really exposed us to a lot of international activities in this sense. And parallelly, when we looked at this, we saw that many countries had remote sensing policy, Earth observation policy, and so on. India did not have a remote sensing policy. So, and at the same time, IRS 1C with the highest resolution was being questioned within the Indian defense frame whether it can be distributed to users, and or should it be in the restricted domain. So we took up the job of creating a remote sensing data policy, the first remote sensing data policy of 1999, and I took the lead for developing the policy framework, getting the cabinet approval, and so on. And we brought resolutions up to 5 meters in the public domain for distribution and 1 meter under some restricted committee clearances activities. So the concept of policy and international collaborations and international presence for India was a big way, one of the experience that we got by mid 2090 or early 2000 time frame. Another thing I must tell you is that in those days, with all these experiences that we had, India was one of the leaders in Earth observation. It matched the world's best civilian satellite in 1995, 98, 2000 time frame with IRS 1C, Cartosat 1, and so on. So we had structured a program which gave us the world's best tag in Earth observation at that time in 2000 time frame. And we were very happy to sort of see that IRS 1C data was globally being received, Cartosat data was being globally received, 16 ground stations were receiving it under Antrix, and almost 60 to 80 crores of revenue every year was being collected. So it gave us a thrill that we could go global, So from an international presence, to be able to globally merchandise our products, globally be making our products available and services available, I think that regime started by the late 90s and the 2000 time frame, and that was very rich experience that we got. One of the personal experience that I have is having traveled to Svalbard because of all these things in 1995-96 time frame. That was really an enriching experience to see the glaciers and go right up to the North Pole, just 1 degree short of the North Pole, on helicopter flights and seeing the Svalbard station. That was a great experience, I think, personally for me, coming into many of these activities in that this one. Another one incident I want to share with my own knowledge is in 1999, after the 1998 nuclear explosion, there was a World National Technology Summit organized by the Government of India, and various science departments were called in to look at how technology needs to be looked at in the future years, and what national technology systems need to be developed. And Dr. Kasurangan was called in to make a very high-level presentation. I was one of the key persons helping him to make the presentation. We were all sitting in Taj, in Palace Hotel in Delhi, just one day before the conference, and the presentations were being organized, various slides and so on. And Dr. Kasurangan was very meticulous. Every slide had to be very good, very new, very fresh, no repetition of materials and so on. So a team of 2-3 of us were there. I was very actively involved in that. Suddenly he asked us, what is a new thing we are going to tell the community, and the minister will be there, the cabinet will be there, and so on. He suddenly looked at us and said, can we go to the moon? This was May 1999, May 13, 1999. He asked us the question, can we go to the moon? And all of us ran back to do the calculations, the launch vehicle team, the satellite team and all, and we came out with one slide saying, can we go to the moon? That was 1999. And when he presented it on that day to an audience of about 300-400 people, ministers, cabinet, secretaries and so on, there was stunned silence. Can India go to the moon? 1999 time frame, and it was really a very sort of a very exhilarating experience to watch the audience on that day, stunned. And at the end of the presentation, which covered many things, and only one slide on can we go to the moon, very nicely articulated by Dr. Kasurangan, he got a thundering ovation. And that triggered the concept of the Chandrayaan mission at that time. Then the Chandrayaan proposals were generated, etc., blah, blah. And 2008, this mission came up. But I just wanted to tell how this came up and what were the methods of doing this whole thing. Very soon, I got into another very major activity of defining a long-term strategy for Earth observation called the Earth Observation 2025 strategy. This was under the leadership of Dr. George Joseph, another excellent, brilliant scientist of ISRO, rather the father of Indian remote sensing program in that sense, and Dr. Kasturi Rangan and a few of us. He set up a committee under Dr. George Joseph. I was a member secretary, and we drafted out one of the best strategy reports that we could do at that time. And the strategy was simple. Create missions which will help national development, which was the NNRMS goal, number one. Number two, privatize Earth observation in India. This was in 2001 time frame. It still is the goal, written down very clearly, saying that please privatize Earth observation. We gave a strategy of steps to be taken up and done and the whole thing. In fact, we created a manifest of 54 launches to be done in 25 years, different types of satellites. ResourceSat, Multispectral, Cartosat, OceanSat, and so on. The manifest is there. And if I look at it today, sometimes I wonder how much of that manifest have we really covered. So one can do an analysis, maybe a research on that aspect also. But what I want to highlight is that at that time, we were matching the world status in state-of-the-art in remote sensing planning, strategy, international collaboration, being one amongst them. And we could create our own strategy, our own policies, our own drive for applications and trust what is required. And we soon realized that privatization of Earth observation is very much required. Way back in 2001-2 time frame to visualize this was great in that sense. And many of these strategies are still now coming up for fore in that particular activity. And the importance of doing standardization, that was also very strongly felt, and we brought out the NNRMS standard, which once again I spearheaded, which is the bedrock of now GIS standards in the country today. In fact, the NNRMS standard was drawing much of this material from the 1989 standard that we had developed in the earliest part of the GIS work. And today it is one of the standard which even everybody uses, and there are still a newer version is yet to come into that activity of this thing, of this one. So many of these forward-looking activities way back in the 90s, 2000s is what we were capable of doing, and I feel very proud to be associated and working in many of those applications in the whole thing. Somewhere in 2005, I shifted my gear, went into the private sector after working 25 years in ISRO. And in private sector, I was very keen to develop business solutions and commercial solutions in remote sensing and GIS. I joined a startup, created a startup with one of the Hyderabad groups, and later on headed ISRI and did varieties of GIS applications in the commercial business. One of the largest projects in GIS, the Delhi State Spatial Data Infrastructure project in 2005-6 time frame, costing 120 crores, was scripted, won and achieved by me in the private sector company in the sense, and it was one of the best projects which was visualized at that point of time. We also took up many projects across the world in UAE, in Japan, in India on various types of GIS and remote sensing solutions, and also in Singapore. For example, the Singapore IMAP, which is today one of the best GIS portals, the technology and the solutions has been developed by the team that I led in ESRI at that point of time. The APDRP, the Augmented Power Restructuring Program of the Government of India, which has a backing of GIS applications in a commercial domain, was also developed in that particular activity when I was in the private sector and the whole thing. So just to say that while there were questions being raised whether GIS is really profitable, can it be commercial and so on, I think we developed a lot of solutions by which we could make it commercial and show that it is possible. I just for the preparation of this talk, I was trying to see what would be my score of revenue that I would have clogged in the different projects that I measured up to, and I came up to something like 200-300 crores over a period of 2005 to 2012 time frame, which is 7 to 8 years, which was phenomenal at those times, to be able to do that sort of a business and different types of solutions into those activities in the sense. Very soon, as I was getting into this private sector in a big way and so on, I was called back by the Planning Commission to define the National GIS. So under Dr. Shailesh Naik's chairmanship, the Planning Commission set up a national task force. I was a member secretary, and I drove the concept of a National GIS. Again, coming back from my experience of understanding Professor Dhawan's NNRMS, the National Resources Information System, the standardization of data, the applications to be done, pulling all of that and saying that if the country has to really benefit from this technology, it must have a national GIS by which content should be easily available for the whole country. Somebody must worry about the content and so on. And applications should be made available in the private sector so that citizen services, government services and private sector services can come up from GIS. And we come out with a beautiful GIS policy and submitted it to the government. I had to spend almost 3 to 4 years doing various types of activities under that particular activity. I also want to mention that subsequent to my ISRO tenure and also working in the industry, myself and some colleagues under the umbrella of National Institute of Advanced Studies did a lot of suo motu studies, trying to visualize our far-sighted thinking capability that we developed in ISRO at that time in late 90s. In 2012, mid 2010s, trying to visualize what should it be for the future. So we did some very good studies on what should be India's space policy, and we have come out with reports on that. We even visualized a space ecosystem in 2014 timeframe, and we published the report, which today is being talked of in 2022 timeframe, saying there has to be a federal system of ISRO, there has to be a private sector system, and there has to be an academia system. It's still in the works. But we could sort of understand that these are things that are required, and if it's not done, the nation is going to be left behind as far as the advantages of space that is there. And we also did, in 2015, we articulated the national imperative of doing a human space flight program. It had not yet been approved at the time, and we published a paper, we submitted it to government and to many others, and they're saying, what are the technical imperatives, what are the economic imperatives and social imperatives of an Indian human space flight program? Even today, it is very meaningful to see that a human space flight program is not a one-off event. It has to be a series, it has to be a continuum. You have to have a vision for the next 50 years if you want to really take up a human space program, and that's what we identified in that. We also did very good study on the challenges to the Indian remote sensing system in 2018-19 timeframe. You know, with a lesser number of IRS satellites, with the private sector in the world going to sub-meter resolutions, with analysis ready data available in the world, with open portals of Sentinel, Landsat and all, there are tremendous challenges that we see for the Indian remote sensing ecosystem in the whole thing, and we have brought out some of those challenges. So our ability to assimilate the experiences of ISRO and try to formulate what the nation should think about, we were able to do these studies and collaborate with some other researchers and bring out the reports into those activities in a sense. And subsequent to this, one of the last activities which I really recall very fondly is just recently in the last 4 years, I was tasked by Tata Trust to take up an initiative of taking the benefits of remote sensing GIS technology to the final farmer. And we conceptualized the concept of an agri-GIS, drawing upon all the experience that we have, saying that removing everything else from the technology, is there something that we can bring to the farmer and benefit him? And we did a project in South Odisha for Tata Trust and showed how the technology of remote sensing, the technology of GIS, data analytics can all help ultimately at a plot level to give plot level advisory to the farmer. So bringing all these capabilities, I think we are very confident that, at least I am very confident that if remote sensing, space technology and Earth observations are to be really meaningful, it has to be driven by the private sector now. And hopefully some of the things that are happening in the country should drive it in that direction. And ultimately it has to benefit the final beneficiary, which is the citizen. If citizens can benefit from remote sensing and GIS and data analytics, nothing like that on the whole thing. So I think these are some of the experience that we have gained and I've gained in the last 40 plus years of my journey. Of course, there are various types of works and people that I have met and journeys done to various countries and different activities. I have led many activities in the international fora. I was the first elected president of the Global Spatial Data Infrastructure Association in 2003 to 2006 timeframe. I have led the IAF activities as its vice president and the Earth Observation Committee. So the exposure that I got in my journey, I think is tremendous. And I think that is what makes ISRO organization so different, that it allows you to do what you want of course, within the dimensions of an organization. And if you're good at it, I think it gives you the tremendous motivation that's required. That's the learning that I have had, at least till I was in ISRO. And I'm sure it must be keeping up the same momentum even now, today, and the whole thing. But, and having worked with some of the best people, knowing their minds, understanding how Professor Dhawan thinks, how Professor Rao thinks, how Dr. Kasturangan thinks, how some of the international space agencies think, Dan Goldin of NASA, the interactions we have had, Sean O'Keefe, ESA chief, Kenneth chief, so many people of them on the whole thing. I think your exposure to understanding human activities, human relations, technology interfaces, interactions tremendously give you the personality and the boost that is required. And I think that is what I have gained in all these years in that sense. And some of the best people I have worked, some best bosses I've had, starting with A.R. Dasgupta, who was one of the best people who gave me the understanding of systems. What is a system? I didn't know when I came as a geologist, but he gave me the understanding of systems and systems analysis. Dr. George Joseph, a physicist to the core. Everything has to be questioned until the answer found. Working with him is a great pleasure. Even today, I love interacting with him in that sense of this one. M.G. Chandrasekhar, a fantastic boss, a go-getter who could get anything done, and work hard in the whole thing. Sridhar Murthy, a very calm mind, strategist. I learned a lot from him in working in the whole activities. Dr. Kasturi Rangan, I think my boss, he's my PhD guide, my mentor in that sense of this one, a fantastic person. And learning from him, just being close with him and working with him and walking behind him is a great experience in that sense. And of course, working with many others, this one, like Montek Singh Ahluwalia in Planning Commission, Sam Pitroda in the National Knowledge Commission, and many others, and so on. And I also benefited from a lovely team. I always believe that get any Indian, give him the motivation, he will produce fantastic. And this is my experience when I did projects in Bharatpur, Dungarpur, Bombay, afterwards ISRO GIS, anything. Indians can do anything, but what they need is the right motivation, right culture. If that culture, motivation, and vision you can give them, I think they can do wonders. And that's exactly what I got from my bosses: the vision, the culture, and so on. So I think these are some beautiful things of my life, and apart from many of the personal things that I have. But I think this shows the journey that the nation also did from early stages of handling digital data, coming up to going to the farmer and talking in different ways, different paths in the sense. And I walked one path. So this is my journey. It's lovely to share with you, all of you. And I really look forward to understanding the journeys of the other people that you're recording and the other path that they have taken, because from that also we can learn a lot. So thank you, Narayan Prasad. Thanks.